Hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Is Alec Murdaugh going to get a new murder trial? He says that the clerk of court, Becky Hill, tampered with the jury, that she interfered with them by making comments about his guilt, his innocence, whether they should believe him, things like that. The jurors have filed affidavits saying that Becky Hill said certain things. And at last, we have her response. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Her response, we're going to compare it to what the jurors said and see whether or not she is contradicting all of the things that they said, she said, that the Murdaugh team thinks is inappropriate. She says she didn't say most of those things, but what you're going to see is there are a few things where she doesn't say that she did not say those things, or just a few of those. And so I want you to see what those are, and you can make your own choices. So I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. We had a great Thanksgiving here. We had a big time first here, which was the dish I took to some friend's house for Thanksgiving was deemed, quote, a showstopper. I can assure you that has never happened in my entire life. I don't cook anything. Things like turning something over in the microwave is like a real culinary accomplishment for me. So this was really huge. So, but what we're going to be talking about tonight, Alec Murdaugh, Becky Hill, and the juror drama. Now, we all know Alec Murdaugh was convicted of 2 murders, his wife and his son. Now, he says he didn't do it. And he now says that the clerk of court's interference with the jury, he believes he should get a new trial. He doesn't think the standard ought to be they convicted him because of what she did, but just the fact that she interfered with them, he says that's enough. So the affidavit from Becky Hill was actually filed a couple of weeks ago. We are really behind with all the Adelson coverage and the other things we've been covering, but we are going to cover Becky Hill's affidavit so you can see what it is. I want to show you what the affidavit looked like so you can see, because I did us a chart and I want to explain to you why. So let's go ahead and add that to somebody saying, what dish did you make? It was a cauliflower casserole. I'll be glad to give you the recipe. I just got it off the internet. The only key was add more cheese than it tells you to. Way more cheese. That's the key, I think. So, okay, so here is her affidavit. And you can see that she makes comments like, as to the allegations contained within the affidavit of juror number 630, I did not tell the jury not to be fooled by evidence. So, but we don't have the affidavit right there. So we just know she says, as to this, I didn't say this, this, or this. But what if there are 5 other things that she agrees she did say? We can't really tell. So like I say, I did a comparison chart for us because I thought it would be easier for us. Now, I am going to talk you through this. It's all color coded. You know me and my charts. So it's all color coded, but it may look complicated, but don't worry. I'm going to be talking us through it. And I'll just kind of explain to you. The purple is just the number of the juror. And then I put where this came from, because if you'll remember, for some of them, the Murdaugh team filed an affidavit for that juror. For others, the state filed a statement by that juror. So I just took the parts that related to Becky Hill. That's it. Just the parts that related to some accusation against Becky Hill. That's all it is. So if, for example, they said Becky Hill didn't do anything, well, there wasn't anything for her to contradict. So I didn't put that in. I only put the stuff where there was something for her to comment on or say something about. So that is the way we're going to go through it. And so anyway, purple is the number of the juror and where we got the information. Green means juror said this, and Becky was like, nope. That's not it. That's not correct. The yellow is places where the juror said something. I put those in red too. That's really kind of a clue to me as I talk you through it. But the yellow with the red means, okay, this is something the juror said, and Becky did not directly contradict that. They were a little bit different the way it was couched. So we'll talk about those. Those are super important because those are points where it's not clear whether Becky Hill just didn't address it or whether it's something that Becky Hill agrees with. And we don't really know the answer, but that makes them extra important. Now, going back to her affidavit, she did say there are numerous misrepresentations and false statements contained within the motion for new trial to which I was not requested to specifically address. As such, this affidavit is not intended to address every allegation contained within the motion for new trial. So what that means is there are things she didn't respond to. She didn't intend to respond to them, and that's just the way it was. So those, the yellow, though, super important. Those are, we're going to really take a look at that. The green is important too, because those are places where a juror made an allegation about what she did, and she says, I did not. Now, what's going to matter for that is credibility. I talked on Friday about the fact that Becky Hill's son, Jeff, has been arrested and now is out on bond and is going to be, has been charged with, will be tried for a wiretapping. As part of that wiretapping, they also took Becky Hill's phone. And I said, while it doesn't appear that there's anything related to the Murdaugh trial or her interference with the jury, if for any reason that ended up affecting her credibility, then that would make a difference in this motion. And you can see we're here because we've got the green, the juror says this, Becky Hill says no. So if Becky Hill isn't believable, that makes the juror more believable. And that's what the judge will be weighing back and forth. Do I believe the juror? Do I believe Becky? In these green ones. And then there were a few, just a very few, you can see there that I did in blue. And that was where I didn't think there was like a direct, I mostly did that one for me. You won't have to worry about it. I'll talk about it when I get there. But the blue ones are ones where I didn't think Becky Hill directly contradicted it, but I kind of thought she said enough things that it was clear she intended to or would contradict that when it came to a hearing, which, you know, there may well be. We don't really know. That hasn't been granted. In fact, we still don't know the name of the new judge yet. We just know that Judge Newman is not on the case. Unless something happened today. Y'all can tell me if that's the case. All right, so let's take a look at the juror's affidavit. This is juror 630. It was an actual affidavit by the juror. You may remember in the Murdaugh motion for new trial a couple of times, instead of filing an affidavit from the juror, they filed an affidavit that was written by the paralegal working for the legal team for Murdaugh. That was where they didn't actually have an affidavit from the juror. All they had was her notes about what the juror had said, which is obviously weaker. And the prosecution has said all of those are hearsay. We don't want them in. So number two, and two is just the paragraph that it referred to within the juror's affidavit. So the juror said, toward the end of the trial, after the President's Day break, but before Mr. Murdaugh testified, the clerk of court, Rebecca Hill, told the jury not to be fooled by the evidence presented by Murdaugh's attorneys, which I understood to mean that Mr. Murdaugh would lie when he testified. That was a huge deal for the Murdaugh team because they say if a clerk, a court official actually says to the jury, don't be fooled by the defense case, that's really a statement that you shouldn't believe the defense. And that would be direct, they say, interference with the jury. Becky Hill, and this is just a quote, I did not tell the jury not to be fooled by evidence presented by Mr. Murdaugh's attorneys. So 630, Becky Hill, nope. Juror 630, Becky Hill, they disagree on that. The juror also said Becky Hill also instructed the jury to watch him closely immediately before he testified, including look at his actions and look at his movements, which I understood to mean that he was guilty. And again, Becky Hill said, I did not instruct the jury to watch him closely. I did not instruct the jury to look at his actions. I did not instruct the jury to look at his movements. Now, here we get to our first yellow one. Our first yellow one was where the juror said, toward the end of the trial, Ms. Hill came into the jury room a lot. We're going to see another reference to that later from another juror. Becky Hill didn't really respond to that, but part of that may be because it's not in and of itself all that important, because Maybe she went into the jury room because they were having some issue with getting lunch, or maybe they were having some matter that was completely legitimate. So there wasn't any real reason for that, that related to getting a new trial. And so maybe that's why she didn't respond to that. Next one, Ms. Hill and the foreperson, juror 826, had private conversations on multiple occasions. The foreperson, juror 826, would tell the bailiff that she needed to speak with Ms. Hill. Ms. Hill would arrive, and then she and the foreperson, juror number 826, would go to another room to have a private conversation. The conversations typically lasted 5 to 10 minutes. The foreperson, juror 826, never said anything about the content of the conversation. For example, she never communicated logistical information after those conversations. This happened 2 or more times, more frequently toward the end of the trial. And Becky Hill, direct contradiction in my view. She said, when juror 826 asked to speak with me, the conversations took place in the jury room hall within earshot of bailiff Bill Polk. The conversations did not involve the evidence, witnesses, or substance of the trial. So she's saying, maybe we sometimes did talk privately, but it wasn't really private in the sense that it was just the two of us. Someone was always present. And in addition, we weren't talking about anything that affected the case itself. Now, number 9, when we began deliberations, Ms. Hill told us that this shouldn't take us, I think I missed something there. Oh, here we go. Well, anyway, it's cut off a little bit, I think. This shouldn't take us long. Right before the defense put up their case, Ms. Hill told the jurors, y'all, whoa, okay, let me try. I have it in 2 ways. Let's see if I can get it in this way. When we began deliberations, Ms. Hill told us this shouldn't take us long, and that if we deliberated past 11 p.m., we would be taken directly to a hotel. We had driven from our homes that morning and were not prepared to stay overnight. Additionally, smokers on the jury asked to be allowed to take smoke breaks, but were told they could not smoke until deliberations were complete. Okay, so with this particular one, Ms. Hill said that if they had deliberated past 11, well, first of all, she completely denies that she ever said to the jury, this shouldn't take us long. False, she says. Now, we're going to see later what she says about staying overnight. They're saying that was something suddenly sprung on them. Smoke break, she said, I did not tell jurors they were prohibited from taking a smoke break during deliberations. So she's denying that completely, saying she may be suggesting it came from the bailiff or somewhere else. She may not be saying it didn't happen, but she's not believing that she personally says she didn't say it. So that isn't something she's admitting to. She disagrees with the juror. Now, after the verdict and immediately before sentencing, Ms. Hill pressured the jury to speak as a group to reporters from the television show, and then the name of the show was redacted. This was a place where she did not directly, first of all, she didn't contradict that at all, that she spoke to them about speaking to reporters after the verdict. And you'll see that again later. So that is possibly something she would admit that she did. I doubt she'd use the word pressured, but she may well admit that she suggested that they talk to reporters from a television show, which is redacted. Now, next is another juror, 741. And this is one of the jurors where Holly Miller, the paralegal, filed the affidavit. And her name is spelled with an I. I got that wrong here, Holli. And so during the trial, this is what the juror 741 said. During the trial, she witnessed the clerk of court. And that means juror 741 witnessed the clerk of court, Becky Hill, come to the jury room. And Ms. Hill and the foreperson, number 826, went into the bathroom. After Ms. Hill and the foreperson exited the bathroom, Ms. Hill told the jurors they could not ask the foreperson questions. And Becky Hill says, completely disagrees with this. I did not have private conversations with juror 826 in a bathroom. My conversations with juror 826 did not involve the evidence, witnesses, or substance of the trial. Now, of course, the Murdaugh team disagrees with that to some degree. They think that it's not just substance issues that she couldn't talk about, but that there were other things. But Becky is adamantly denying that she talked about anything connected to Murdaugh's trial. Juror 741 also said several times during the trial, Ms. Hill told the jurors that the media would want to interview jurors at the end of the trial. And during one of these conversations, she passed out business cards from the media to jurors. At the end of the trial, Ms. Hill told redacted that no one from the media wanted to interview her. I wonder where that came from. Like, somebody must have been very upset. Maybe it was Juror 741. The way it's phrased, it's not clear if Juror 741 is talking about someone else or if she's talking about herself, but it sounds like someone was upset about this. But Becky Hill says, and I put part of it in yellow, and the part of it I put in yellow relates to when there was some conversation. First of all, she said during the trial, not after, during the trial, I did not hand out business cards of media personnel. So she may be admitting that she did that afterwards and saying, so what? Trial was over. During the trial, again, during the trial, I did not tell members of the jury that the media would want to interview them at the end of the trial. So again, she's saying during the trial, I didn't do this. Now, she doesn't really address this comment that she told somebody the media did not want to interview them. There was a comment in her book about a juror who slept through the trial, and it may have been a statement related to that where Becky Hill said to the juror who was sleeping, I'm just saying it could be, I don't know this, that the media wouldn't want to interview you because you slept through the trial. Perhaps there was something like that. Now, right before the defense, another comment from Juror 741, right before the defense put up their case, Ms. Hill told the jurors, y'all are going to hear things that will throw you all off. Don't let this distract you or mislead you. Now, that is really significant because that relates directly to whether or not the jurors should believe Alec Murdaugh's case. That's direct. But Becky Hill says, I did not tell jurors, y'all are going to hear things that will throw you all off. Don't let this distract or mislead you. So she's saying, they say this. No, that didn't happen. That's a direct contradiction. And one where the court is going to have to decide which person he believes. And part of that will depend on how many people say that Becky Hill did that. So we'll keep going. Juror affidavit 785. Juror 785. We have talked about Juror 785 more than any other juror. This is the egg juror, our favorite juror, because we have talked about her so much. So there are plenty of other videos you can learn all about what the egg juror says, and what she says is not fully contradicted by Becky Hill, as you can see by the large amount of yellow that I have here. The main reason for that is we still don't know what Becky Hill's story is going to be about this whole fiasco with the ex-husband who supposedly said that this juror was talking about her opinion of the case. And in fact, he said she got drunk. The two of them were out together, got drunk, and she started talking about her opinions in the case. The judge said at the time he was kicking her off the case, not for anything related to the ex-husband, but for comments she made to tenants of hers when she delivered a refrigerator to them. But this one is really controversial. The two sides strongly disagree over what happened here. But the ultimate upshot of it was that this juror sat through the entire trial and would have been on the jury, but instead was removed from the jury on the day of deliberations, and another juror, an alternate, was substituted in for her. Okay, so let's talk about what she says. During the juror 785, the egg juror said, during the presentation of the defense case after President's Day, but before Mr. Murdaugh testified in his own defense, I'm going to switch over to this document so it'll be a little bit bigger for me. Okay. Colleton County Clerk of Court Rebecca Hill told the jurors not to be fooled by the evidence presented to the jury by Mr. Murdaugh's attorneys. This is another juror saying the not to be fooled language. Again, Becky Hill's answer is, I didn't tell jurors not to be fooled by the evidence presented by Alec Murdaugh's attorneys. So this is a super important one. And Becky Hill says false. That's not true. Then in paragraph 3, this juror said, in late February 2023, Ms. Hill questioned me, and now we're getting into the ex-husband issue, about a Facebook post on the Walterboro word of mouth page. She summoned me to speak with her alone in an office in the courthouse. Now, none of this is contradicted. She told me someone emailed her about a post my ex-husband, Tim Stone, purportedly made, which purportedly stated that I made comments to him about the guilt or innocence of Mr. Murdaugh. She directly asked me whether I was inclined to vote guilty or not guilty. Now, she says, Becky Hill, I did not ask Juror 785 whether Juror 785 was inclined to vote guilty or not guilty. But she did not contradict the rest of that she questioned her about a Facebook post on the Walterboro word of mouth page, that she summoned her to speak with her alone in an office in the courthouse, that she told her that someone had emailed her about a post from her ex-husband that said he'd made comments. She did not contradict those parts. She is about to make one statement, which I want you to take a look at in this next line. The juror also said, Ms. Hill said the post said, I had been drinking with my ex-husband, and that while drunk with him, I expressed opinions on the guilt or innocence of Mr. Murdaugh. That never happened. And I told Ms. Hill it never happened. I did not go drinking with my ex-husband. In fact, I had not seen him in approximately 10 years. That whole issue has been hard fought in the briefing. Here's what Becky Hill says. I did not fabricate nor did I create any Facebook post related to Juror 785. Do you see how that doesn't really answer the question? That just says, I didn't make up a Facebook post, which, may be the case, but we still have to wonder, where did the story come from? Because we know that Becky Hill said to the judge talked about this post, Walterboro word of mouth, talked about all these things. And yet she's saying here she didn't fabricate it. She didn't create any Facebook posts. So I guess she's saying she did see a Facebook post. And so not contradicted is what Ms. Hill said about the post, that she'd been drinking with her ex-husband, while drunk expressed opinions. And the juror says, no, that didn't happen. So there's a disconnect there between what Becky Hill is saying, which means that we just don't know yet what Becky Hill is going to say about that. She was simply doing some contradictions in her affidavit, but she didn't go all the way into what the story will be. So we still don't know. Okay, number 5, I asked to see the post, but Ms. Hill would not or could not show it to me. I've never seen it, and to my knowledge, no one has. That's what the juror says. Later that day, Ms. Hill told me SLED and Colleton County Sheriff's Office personnel went to my ex-husband's house, and he purportedly confirmed he made the post. She told me she would reinstate a restraining order I previously had against my husband. Now, the parts in green, she contradicted those. She said, I did not tell Juror 785 that SLED and Colleton County Sheriff's Office personnel went to her ex-husband's house. So she disagrees with that. Says that part I didn't say. She also says, I did not tell Juror 785 that I would reinstate a restraining order against her ex-husband. So those two things she's clearly disagreeing with, but she doesn't really disagree directly with the question about whether or not this juror asked to see the post, whether or not Ms. Hill wouldn't or couldn't show it to her, whether anyone has ever seen it, and about whether or not the ex-husband confirmed he made the post, but apparently not to SLED. So those little pieces still aren't contradicted and may play into whatever she has to say about where this Facebook post idea came from. Okay, wait, I'm going to have to go over here. Oh, thank you, Marlon. I really appreciate that. We have been doing a bunch of videos lately. It's been a lot of fun, but it is exhausting. I'm glad y'all like it. Okay, let's make sure I am on the right page. Yes, okay. This juror, 785, also said when Miss Hill first asked me about the Facebook posting purportedly made by my ex-husband, I showed her a picture of my ex-husband. Now, that's not contradicted. For that reason, I now believe she always knew the apology post referencing Satan was not posted by my ex-husband. Now, on that, I felt like it's maybe not directly contradicted, but I thought it was close enough by her statement that she didn't, Becky Hill's statement, that she didn't fabricate or create any Facebook post. So I think that would sort of assume then that she didn't know the apology post was not posted by her ex-husband because she didn't make it up. So I think Becky Hill is contradicting that. She's saying, I would say that does not suggest she knew the apology post was false. She's not going that far or agreeing to that. On March 2nd, and for those of y'all who haven't seen the Ed Juror, and you really want to follow all those, this whole story is just absolutely fascinating. So by all means, go back and watch some of those. You will really enjoy learning about that. But the story that was talked about in the court and that was part even of the record had to do with this ex-husband saying, it was really complicated, but when Becky Hill went to find this ex-husband post that said we were drunk and my wife was talking about how she felt about her opinions about Murdaugh's guilt or innocence, when all that happened, the next day, when Becky went to find it, she couldn't find that post. And so the next day there was something that just a second, sorry, a little distracted with the comments. So the next day, I think it was probably the next day, this person posted something saying, sorry, got drunk, made this post I shouldn't have made. I would like to apologize. That person who made that post had a very similar name, Timothy Stone, to the juror's ex-husband. That post was presented to the court, and the belief was that it was the post by the ex-husband. Turns out, different Timothy Stone, it wasn't the same person. And we'll go to paragraph number 9. On March 2nd, 2023, the day of the verdict, I received a call from my ex-husband, Tim Stone, as I was getting on the bus to travel with the rest of the jurors to the courthouse. I didn't answer. This phone call upset me greatly, and I put that was contradicted just because it's not something one way or the other in Becky's knowledge. I asked to speak with the clerk of court, which I did by telephone using bailiff Mr. Bill's phone. I told her I was scared. That's not directly contradicted. Becky Hill, said that the Murdaughs probably got to him. This was another really important comment, because if the Murdaughs, quote, got to him, that means the Murdaughs are sort of this sinister cartel-like family, that something like the mafia, and that sounds terrible. It sounds like it really it's suggesting to the jury how they should perceive the entire Murdaugh clan as well as Alec Murdaugh. But Becky Hill contradicted that, I thought, fairly directly. I did not state to juror 785 that the Murdaughs probably got to him. So she denies that ever happened. Paragraph 10. Oops. Oh, back over here. Yep, y'all are still on paragraph 10. Okay. Ms. Hill then again asked me questions about my opinion regarding Mr. Murdaugh's guilt. She asked if I was leaning one way or the other. I told her that Creighton Waters' closing was good, but I still had questions. She asked me what kind of questions, and I replied, questions about the guns. She asked what would make me think he's innocent. I stated that no murder weapon was found. She then asked, well, what makes you think he's guilty? I said, Paul's video at the dog kennels. She then stated that everything Mr. Murdaugh has said has been lies and that I should forget about the guns. They will never be seen again. So now we flip over to what Becky Hill said, and I felt like she pretty thoroughly contradicted every single bit of this. She said, I didn't ask juror 785 about her opinions regarding Mr. Murdaugh's guilt. I didn't ask 785. Well, what makes you think he's guilty? That was the part where she didn't directly contradict the next question, what would make you think he's innocent? But it sort of seemed to be included in that to me. That's why I gave it the blue. I did not discuss the evidence presented at trial with Juror 785. I did not tell Juror 785 that everything that Mr. Murdaugh said had been lies. And I did not tell Juror 785 to forget about the guns. They will never be seen again. So they disagreed. The judge is going to have to decide who's believable there. Now, number 11, let me flip back over here. Ms. Hill then asked about the views of the rest of the jury. She told me if the foreperson would just go in and ask for a raise in hands, this would be over and done with. She said everyone needs to be on the same page. Now, Becky Hill says, I didn't ask Juror 785 about the views of the rest of the jury. And I didn't tell Juror 785 that if the foreperson would just go in and ask for a raise in hands, this would be over and done with. I didn't inform Juror 85 that everyone needs to be on the same page. There was also a comment by this juror. She then, Becky, again said she would reinstate a restraining order I previously had against my ex-husband and that she would call Judge Newman about the restraining order. Becky Hill says, I didn't tell Juror 785 that I would reinstate a restraining order against her ex-husband. And then we go to another paragraph that Becky Hill didn't seem to address in her affidavit. The juror said, when we visited the Moselle crime scene, Ms. Hill and Juror 826 walked off together, avoiding other jurors in order to have a private conversation. And maybe she didn't contradict that because it's not necessarily a problem. If what they're talking about is, where's the nearest bathroom, or how do we find the van to get back, or how long will it take to drive back to the courthouse? There are a lot of things they could have been talking about that would be entirely legitimate related to administrative issues, but that weren't something that would be affecting the Murdaugh trial or guilt or innocence or anything like that. So the next juror is, we have completed the ed juror, 326, Holly Miller. Holly Miller affidavit and a SLED statement. This juror talked to the state and the defense. Most of the jurors seem to talk to one or the other, but not Juror 326, who talked to both. So there's the affidavit from Holly Miller where she writes out what she understood Juror 326 to say. And then there's also a statement that the juror wrote out and gave to SLED when they did an interview. So Juror 326 was asked if Ms. Hill told the jurors not to let the defense mislead them. He did not specifically recall this statement, but he did recall that Ms. Hill commented to him and other jurors about the photos that would be admitted into evidence, indicating that the images would be disturbing. Now, I talked to you in a recent video about why this really matters and actually is of concern to me. The attorneys fight significantly over the admission of certain photographs that are really gory, things like an autopsy photograph, a decomposed body, anything like that. Those are really hard fought because the defense, or the defense would be either civil or criminal. The defense will say these are prejudicial. If we show the jury this, they're going to assume negative things. They're going to be so overwhelmed by the visual of this that they're not going to be able to be fair to us. And so this is actually hard fought. So statements that increase the impact of the photographs of the jury, or could make a big difference. So that was why I said the images would be disturbing, could be a significant point. But Becky Hill says, I did not tell jurors, y'all are going to hear things that will throw you all off. Don't let this distract or mislead you. She contradicted that. She did not contradict the part about the images being disturbing. She didn't address that one way or the other in her affidavit. She might say that she disagrees with that and she may just not have included it. But if that's still left out there, that would be a significant issue. Juror number 326 also stated that the jurors were stationed in two separate rooms when they were not in the courtroom, and that he was in a room with mostly other male jurors. He was not in the same room as jurors 630, 741, and 785. Now, none of that is directly relevant, but I needed that to explain the rest of his statement to you. Juror 326 stated that Miss Hill, would visit it's really tiny when it's in this format, would visit the other room more often, and that he could not hear what she was telling the jurors in the other room. Now, the way the defense would play this is they would say, look, you, juror 326, for example, you can't say that Becky Hill didn't talk about this, that, or the other because you weren't around her as much. She might have said those things to the people who were in the other room, and you don't have any way to contradict that. And she did not directly contradict the idea that she visited the other room more often. But of course, it's also not necessarily prejudicial. Just the fact that she visited that room, maybe there was an issue that she needed to address that was entirely related to her administrative function as the clerk of court. It might not necessarily be bad. All right, as the jury was deliberating, the bailiff and Miss Hill were back to the juror statement. The bailiff and Miss Hill told the jurors that they could not take a smoke break during deliberations. There were 6 smokers on the jury. Becky Hill, nope, I did not tell jurors they were prohibited from taking a smoke break during deliberations. The reason the Murdaugh team thought this was important, they were arguing that Becky Hill was really pushing the people on the jury to go ahead and make a decision. And she wanted a quick, easy verdict, guilty. She didn't want it to linger around a long time, and she wanted to be sure they would get a guilty verdict. The Murdaugh team's theory about why she did this was because she wanted to write a book and felt like she would be more likely to be published if she managed to get, or the jury gave, a guilty verdict, and that her book wouldn't be all that interesting if in fact it was a not guilty verdict. So she felt like she really had to push for that. That was what the Murdaugh team says is the theory. The next thing the juror said is, when asked if he thought the clerk of court, Becky Hill, was inserting herself in the process of the trial, juror 326 responded, I can see this. Now, she didn't contradict this, but I felt like her overall statements more or less contradicted this. And then when this juror made his SLED statement, just wrote out her thoughts about the general topics related to this whole new trial in Becky Hill, the juror said, I believe that my interaction with Mrs. Hill, the court clerk, was limited to information from the judge or about important events such as graphic material or how long of a break we would get. Graphic material, I think, goes back to that issue of commenting on the photographs. I assume the autopsy photographs, the murder scene photographs of the bodies. And that is a significant issue. So the juror is doubling down on that, saying, yep, that we did talk about that. She did say something about graphic material. How far that will go when it comes time for a potential new trial, we'll see. Or not just a potential new trial. I mean, for the hearing and the motion and the ruling on the new trial. I don't mean because there's not been a decision yet on the new trial. Okay, juror 254. This was a juror statement taken by SLED for the state. And this juror said, the only time that I had interaction with anyone was through the bailiff, other than one time when we as a jury was waiting to go into the courtroom and a comment was made to watch his body language. So I put this in the blue because the comment was made to, quote, watch his body language. That's pretty specific, but I felt like what she said in other places was pretty close to covering that. I didn't instruct the jury to watch him closely. I did not instruct the jury to look at his actions. I did not instruct the jury to look at his movements. So there's a little bit of a difference in language, but I felt like she had mostly contradicted that. Okay, juror 544. Another statement taken by SLED for the state. Mrs. Hill mentioned if we were sequestered that we would be staying at a hotel and we would be given time to gather our things to stay at the hotel. This would contradict what she said. Remember, we're talking about the issue of whether or not the jury was given any notice about this potential. Remember that the Murdaugh team thinks that the push was on, that they really wanted an immediate, instant, fast result in a guilty verdict. And in order to do that, they made it really difficult, according to the Murdaugh team, for them to deliberate in a kind of slow, calculated way by saying things like, you can't take smoke breaks, and you were going to be taken to a hotel for the night, and you were given no notice of this and no chance to pack. You don't have your toothbrush with you. Too bad. You're not going home. So this juror is saying something a little bit different, but that Ms. Hill did mention if we were sequestered, we would be staying at a hotel. But the juror is saying also that they would be given time to gather our things to stay at the hotel. All right. So we are almost toward the end. So if you have questions, this is the time. Put those in with your question marks at the beginning, which will help me notice them more. And then, because I'm almost through with this section, and then we got a little bit more to talk about. Okay, so we're now at a new juror. This is juror 729, another statement taken by SLED. And this juror said, on the day of sentencing, we were approached by Dateline and Ms. Hill, who asked if we wanted to do an interview. We told her no. She seemed disappointed, but let it go. Now Becky Hill didn't directly contradict that. She said during the trial, I did not tell members of the jury that the media would want to interview them at the end of the trial. Now, the day of sentencing was the day after the verdict. And so the fact that people wanted to talk to them then, there's already been a verdict. So what she's saying, I felt was, oh, that's close enough. She seems to be saying, I talked to jurors after the trial, or at least not contradicting that. Same with during the trial, I did not hand out business cards of media personnel. So let's pull that out so we can talk some more. So as you can see, there were a lot of comments from the jurors, from a number of different jurors. In fact, all told, I believe there were 7 jurors who said something that I felt like made the list of things that Becky Hill would want to or need to contradict. Of those, I believe 6 were actual jurors. Only 785 was an alternate. I'm not completely sure about that. I couldn't find a list of the numbers of all the jurors who were on the final list, not alternates, sat and actually made the decision. We do know for a fact that 785 was not a final juror, that she was an alternate. So I think that one of the most important issues is going to be the credibility of Becky Hill, because you can see there are a number of places, all of those green places are places where a juror said Becky Hill did or said this, and Becky Hill said, I did not. So it went back and forth like that. Obviously, the judge is going to need to believe Becky Hill. So if there's something that has a huge impact on her credibility, that's going to be significant. But we don't have any indication that that's the case yet. The only thing we know is the reports that Becky Hill's phone was seized as part of the investigation into her son being charged with wiretapping. So I'm going to take a quick look for some, what dish did you make? Dawn wants to know what that was so good. It was a cauliflower casserole with tons of cheese, Gruyere cheese, and also bacon. So what could go wrong, right? That would explain why it was so good. So what happens next? Linda is asking me. What happens next is that first of all, we get a new judge. A new judge gets appointed since Judge Newman has taken himself off everything related to the murder case or its aftermath, including this new trial. There will be a new judge appointed. And when that new judge is appointed, they'll put out some kind of plan or schedule. It is possible that the judge could rule on everything without a hearing. I mean, I don't see why he couldn't. I don't think there would be a rule in this situation. So the judge could say, okay, this is something that I'm just going to go ahead and rule on right now based on the briefs that you've submitted. I would think that that would be unlikely. If I were the judge, I would want people to come in and talk to me. I'd want to look them in the eyes and hear what they had to say directly. That's what I would want. What kind of hearing, though? Very much up in the air. The state says they want the judge to do all the questioning. Just judge ask the juror questions and that's it. There's nothing else. The defense thinks there should be cross-examination. The juror comes in and the defense and prosecution get to ask that juror questions. We don't know. We also don't know if we'll be allowed to see any of that. I would guess that parts of it would be open to the public, but I'm not sure that the questions of the jurors will be. That'll just have to all be decided by the court once the court is appointed and once there is a judge. So Rebecca asked me, do you believe Becky dodged a few instead of contradict by her wording? Yes, Rebecca, I do. And I don't mean that necessarily to be bad, but I do think that there were certain places where she didn't make a comment because she could agree to part of that. And she was told just contradict these, or her attorneys decided that's all she would do. But I do think that there are places where when she didn't contradict it, it's because that part was true. For example, I would guess that she would admit that after the verdict, she went to some of the jurors and said, hey, do you want to appear on these TV shows? There are people who would like to interview you. I think she would say, yes, I did that. And I think that would make it, so I think that would make it something that she would agree with. And that's why she wrote it the way she did, the way she said, during the trial, I didn't talk to them about this. I think she's suggesting that's because she did talk to them later and she doesn't think that that was anything bad or problematic. So she's okay with that. I want to say too, before I get to some more questions, I dropped 2 videos this weekend and they got a lot fewer views. And I think you really want to go see those because I think you will really like them. One of them was related to what I called the secret hearing in the Delphi case. This was a hearing that was not held. There was a record made of it, but not one that was public. There were TV cameras out there in the courtroom, but in the meantime, the judge held a private conference with the lawyers, and that is the point at which everything went off the rails. That private conference has now been released. We now have the transcript for that. So I went into what that transcript says. I pulled out the highlights because the judge came out into the courtroom and said, the defense attorneys for Richard Allen, accused of the Delphi murders, resigned. And it was shocking. Everyone was there to have a hearing in the case and to watch and observe the hearing. There was no hearing. Instead, the defense lawyers had resigned. These were defense lawyers who had just filed a 126-page detailed brief on behalf of their client. It seemed just unimaginable that they would have suddenly resigned. Well, within a couple of days, the attorneys started saying, we didn't resign. We got kicked off the case by the judge. And they said, we'd like to see that transcript. And the court would not give them a copy of that transcript, they said. So the Supreme Court ordered that transcript be released. And now we had that. And we were able to look at it and say, well, okay, did the judge kick them off the case? What are the answers to some of these questions? So it's just really fascinating. You definitely want to watch that. And a little short video I did on about 4.5 minutes on a serial killer who apparently claims he's pen pals now with Rex Heuermann, the Gilgo Beach serial killer, allegedly. And the two of them, according to this happy face serial killer, the two of them have been writing, and he gave some advice to Rex Heuermann. So it's just 4.5 minutes, but I think you'd enjoy that one too. Okay, so let's head back over to some questions. Let's see. Ask Cypher, asking me, were there witnesses about what Becky Hill said? There were witnesses in the sense that the jurors heard this, and many of the jurors would have heard this. So I think there's going to be a lot of contradiction when people come before the court, if that's the way it happens. If there's a hearing, I think there will be a lot of contradictions. Some jurors will say, I never heard that. And other jurors will say, I did. And we'll just have to wait and see what happens. When the state had the jurors write out their statements, it wasn't really guided in the way that a questioner would guide it. So I think we will get a lot more information then. Annie K is saying, this is a mess. Do you think Murdaugh attorneys are playing a long game, delaying simply to go to federal prison? He can't believe he would ever be exonerated. You know, Annie, I think that is no longer the issue. And the reason I think that is that part of the plea deal that he did related to the financial crimes. Remember, they announced what he would be doing with the financial crimes. He agreed to state prison for that. massively long sentence. And so I think that initially, I certainly thought he was maybe angling to go to federal prison. I think not anymore. I don't think that he even intends to pursue that very hard. It certainly won't do him much good because that'll be a relatively short sentence, and the vast majority would be served in state court. So I initially thought, like you, that might be part of it, but now I don't really think that anymore. Amy wants to know if you add brie and bacon, a little bit of cauliflower, is that a vegetable? I count that as a vegetable, Amy. That's what I would like to say. But yeah, maybe, yeah, I can see where maybe not, but I certainly counted it as a vegetable. Rebecca asked me, oh, sorry, I already answered that one. Let me go down a little bit further. All right, here's Earl. Do you not think there is a possibility that her planted or attempted to plant the Facebook post? He obviously has technical skills. So do you not think that there's a possibility? I bet the word son is missing, that her son planted or attempted to plant the Facebook post. He obviously has technical skills. I don't think that his arrest relates to that, because his arrest related to a single incident of wiretapping. It may be expanded later. There may be more charges they find out about, but related to a single charge of wiretapping on, I believe it was July 20th. And that would have been too late really for the Facebook, and that wouldn't be wiretapping anyway, planting something on Facebook, because it was from the warrant, it looked like it was two county employees who were talking to each other, and he intercepted that phone call. That's what it sounded like to me from the warrant. So I would say that that particular incident. Now, could there be other evidence that he attempted to plant a Facebook post? Maybe, but I haven't heard anybody suggest that yet. I guess that would be something that would come out later, but at this point I would say no. All right, I'm looking. Does Becky have grounds for libel if this is not proven? That's what Jean asked me. Probably not, because this was done in the context of a lawsuit, and typically you're able to make protected statements within a lawsuit. So that would be my guess. Now, they also, if you will recall, made statements at a press conference. Now, that might not be protected. I don't know the rules in South Carolina. BB here asked me, has it been determined we are having a new trial? No, not at all. Not at all. That's what the hearing would be about. Would there be a new trial? And then if the judge said, yes, I believe there's grounds for a new trial, then the new trial would go forward. If the judge said, I don't believe there's grounds for a new trial, the case would go back up on appeal, and it would now have an extra ground. The extra ground would be the denial of the motion for new trial. At least that's what I think it would be. So let me see if there's any more questions. I'm going to take like one more, I think. Oh, wait, no, I've asked. Sorry, I've already answered that one. That was Annie's question again. I don't know why I'm getting these. Hippie Plants asked me, if a new trial, will the same things be allowed or not allowed in as far as evidence as the first trial, like financial crimes, the boat case? How did they decide what can and cannot be brought in? Great question, Hippie Plants. And the answer is that it might not be the same, because there's a new judge. There would be precedent for all of those things to be let in because one judge has already made that decision. But the Murdaugh team was already appealing that, and a new judge might say, no, it's more limited. There were also arguments that the defense team had opened the door to some of these things. And maybe if they didn't ask the same question in the same way, the judge wouldn't make that same ruling. So I do think I do think that the question of evidence will all be revisited, and there could be different decisions. All right, Annie is saying, thank you, Annie. She's saying, let's have memberships. We are working on that. Marlon has even done some really cool emojis for us that we're going to include, and I am hoping to roll that out really, really soon. So thank you for asking about that. Tomorrow is the Murdaugh sentencing for his financial crimes. We are going to have an extra live tomorrow night at 7, and we'll be talking about Murdaugh and the statements made by the victims. They're going to be making victim impact statements for his financial crimes. So we're going to be taking a look at all of that. And I want to say a special Thanksgiving thank you to the moderators, Marlon and Mama Pinks, and to all of you who have subscribed, who have liked my videos, who have watched the videos. I honestly can't even tell you how much I appreciate it. So thank you all. I have as I do on occasion, I do not have my outro, so I will just have to say good night and thank you all. I appreciate your watching.